Iceland, the land of ice and fire, home to 10,000 waterfalls and 40 times as many people. While famous for its Viking heritage, its midnight sun, and the glaciers that cover 10% of its landmass, the country is probably best known for its geothermal features. Iceland is the only country divided across the North American and European tectonic plates, the activity of which gives rise to its volcanic activity and hot springs. Ultimately, the country hosts a vast number of natural beauties across its 5 main biomes, those being the tundra, the wetlands, the woodlands, the grasslands, and the barren areas consisting of glaciers and igneous rock, or as the kids call it, cool lava. With so many diverse landscapes to explore, it would be great if there were some sort of backpacking trail that allowed one to visit all of them in just a few days. Christened on September 30th, 1978, the Laugavegar Trail spans 34 miles, or as the Icelandic like to say, 55 kilometra. Each year, nearly 10,000 people from around the world come to Iceland and attempt to complete the hike. And this year would see 2 college roommates reunited to see if they could immortalize their names in the logbooks too. Leaving the capital city of Reykjavik, we headed 113 miles by bus to the trailhead, Laugavegar. After the long 3-hour bumpy bus ride, we finally made it to base camp. There, we got some valuable advice from the locals, such as the best way to pick up Icelandic women is to get alcohol and share it with them, as well as the best things to do in the area. With those words of wisdom in hand, Brian went fishing in the glacial Meltwater River, while my dad and I went hiking the Plaunukur Mountain. The brief day hike, which consisted of 320 meters of elevation gain, concluded with a panoramic preview of our upcoming trek, something we would see up close and personally in the days ahead, starting with the remains of the caldera collapse of Brennisteynsalda. Our first day of hiking would be the most difficult. The day would cover around 1,500 feet of elevation gain over 6 miles, and with our bags fully packed with all of the essentials, the weight on our backs would make each step all the more challenging. As previewed the day prior, we began the hike to Raftanunuska by cutting through the lava field, checking the first biome off our list, the barren areas. The field was created by the eruption and subsequent caldera collapse of 1477, creating a stunning dichotomy between the pastel mountains and the rhyolite rubble. As we hiked through the volcanic debris and silently passed through the rising geothermal steam, we couldn't help but feel like we were walking on a distant planet. Leaving the lava field behind, we ascended up to the Storver Valley towards the slopes of Suðull. This part of the day was defined by its gentle but consistent incline, followed by a long plateau towards the snow-capped mountains ahead. Now, I say ahead like we were close at this point, but for the record, the day had only just begun, as we'd covered no more than 2 miles. So let's just fast forward to the next interesting bit. After some time, we made it to our second biome, the tundra. As the painted mountains and warm geothermal features gave way to the stark, cold, snowy expanse. With the rising temperatures brought by summer, much of the snow had begun to melt, leaving the terrain treacherous and difficult to navigate. Each step left us vulnerable to post-holing, a fate some of us met more than others. Finally, after a long trudge across the slopes of Suðull, we made it to Raftanunuska, our stopping point for the night. And while the hostel was cramped, it was nice to finally lay down and get some shut-eye. What goes up must come down, and on the second day of our trek, we made our way down from the high-altitude Huskuldal ski hut to Lake Altavand. Today involved another 12 kilometers of distance, this time with a net loss of 400 plus meters of elevation. The net here is important to take note. Oh, somebody just went down. Yeah, Brian just totally ate it. I think he's okay though. Anyways, as I was saying, the net here is important to take note of, as we began the day with additional elevation gain, going up and over several small peaks. From the highest point of the trip, we caught our breath and took in the amazing views around us. From there, we went across the ridgeline, walking through the creeks formed by the glacial melt, heading towards the massive lake in the distance. As you may recall, the day required 400 meters of elevation loss. But we had mostly been going up, so now it was finally time to make the slow and steady descent, hopefully without falling along the way. At last we had made it to the bottom, making our way across our third biome, the wetlands. The final stretch consisted of a long walk through the valley along a dirt road towards our final destination. Making it to camp, we were greeted by our accommodations and a great view of the Alpine Lake. Our penultimate day would be our longest yet, being around 10 miles with not much change in elevation. So while the hike would be mostly flat, we would have to complete several river crossings, the first of which was about ankle deep. Afterwards, we continued our trek, marching through the dried lake bed that constituted the majority of today's hike, making our way to the next landmark. Not too much later, we found ourselves at our second river crossing, this one via a bridge, followed soon after by our third river crossing, this one being a little bit sketchier as we waded through nearly knee-deep waters. The current was fast and strong, but we all made it over without getting too wet. Well, I really thought you were going over at the end. The rest of the day would look nearly indistinguishable from the rest, as it was 6-ish miles hiking through a flat lake bed. So here are some out-of-context sound bites from our conversations.
Scandinavian, now that's interesting. And the people who did the thing, moon landing, was how they got that. Diffusion was probably volcano. That might have been a volcano. Just before I caught back up with you guys, and I thought, wow, now I can grow flowers. This is cool.
Finally, after a lot more walking, we finally made it to camp for the night. With several hours to kill before dinner, Brian got some rest while my dad and I checked out the Grand Canyon of Iceland, the 4-kilometer-long, 600-meter-deep Markarfljót Canyon. Upon our return, there was some hostility in the hostel, so we opted to spend the night in a nearby tent. Our final day would be our longest, as we needed to cover the last 11 miles to Thorsmørk before the final bus left for Reykjavik. The day began by descending into the Markarfljót Canyon, walking along its edge before finally climbing our way out. There we were greeted by our fourth biome, the grasslands, where we would spend several hours covering the flat terrain, heading towards our final and deepest river crossing. Again, we all made it across without slipping or falling in. However, the current was strong enough to break Brian's flip-flops.
You got it, Brian.
Yeah, man.
On the other side of the river, we finally reached the fifth and final biome, the woodlands. Cutting through the beautiful boreal birch forest, it was hard to believe we had been marching through a lava field just 3 days prior. With one final ascent, using all of our remaining energy, we could finally see the finish line in the distance. Racing through the forest, we covered the last 2 miles as quickly as we could, until finally the tree line broke and we had made it. We had finished the Laugavegar trail.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass. Not quite like that. I'd say it was more, we came, we saw, we survived. That too.
Lastly, I just wanted to say thank you to Brian and my dad for making this trip possible.